time that I've had the opportunity to speak to this group. When the Sterling Club was still open, Joe asked me to make a presentation about 2 or 3 years ago, and I must have done well enough for him to ask me to come back, although it's been a long time. I have a lot of new information. In fact, it is so new, I have never seen this PowerPoint presentation until about 5 minutes before. So you are the test class, you are the guinea pigs. If you like this, at the end, cheer. If you don't, just quietly leave the room, and we'll change the presentation. That was kind of in honor of our former good friend, Tom Wiesner. He used to say at the Marina, if you like the lunch today, tell about 600 of your friends. If you don't, just leave the room very quiet. So, as Joe mentioned, I've been in the state of Nevada for 30 years. I moved here in 1982 to go to the University of Nevada, Reno. I moved here in 1988 to work for, many of us remember former Senator Chick Hecht. I worked in that campaign. In case you haven't read the paper, since 1988 we lost. I didn't have a career at that point. I moved here for that job and I didn't have anything going forward. I then was hired by the Lee Discovery Children's Museum to be their development director. I raised about $3.5 million in 22 months. And following that stint, I started my own company in 1990. I have worked on transportation infrastructure projects between here and Southern California since 1991. So along the I-15 corridor, around $10 billion worth of projects that we've worked on from San Diego to Las Vegas. And I'll even take credit for projects in Salt Lake City, and it had nothing to do with them, but I'll take credit for it anyway. But we've looked along the entire corridor for the last 22 years, and it's been a great honor to work on those projects. Back in 1990-something, had an opportunity to serve on a couple of commissions here. Senator Reid appointed me to the National Surface Transportation Policy and Revenue Study Commission in 2005. I served on former Governor Kenny Gwynn's Blueprint Task Force on Transportation. And last week, Governor Brian Sandoval appointed me to the State Transportation Board as the first Southern Nevada designated seat. So that was a true honor for me to have a friend of mine from college of 30 years pick up the phone and ask me if I would serve on the Transportation Board. So enough about me and my background. That'll be the most boring part of my presentation. What I really want to talk to you today is about how over the last 12 months, Friday was my first anniversary of being in this position. This is the most difficult thing I've ever taken on in my entire career. I had a really good gig before I was recruited to take this job a year ago. I could work as little, and I did that extremely well, or as much as I wanted to. I could make as little or as much as I wanted to. I never really did the make as much as I wanted to as well as I could have. But when I was asked to take this position, I initially said no, because I had a really good life, and was kind of talked into it. And when I tell people about this, my joke is that a bunch of guys with crooked noses took me into a back room and said, "You'll take this job." The reality was it was a bunch of women with crooked noses and guns who took me into a back room to take this job, and that's true. The mayor of Las Vegas and the city councilman from Henderson and the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce and an executive at Switch pulled me aside and said, "You kind of have an obligation and a responsibility to take a serious look at this position." And so I couldn't be more happy to have survived the first 12 months because this is probably the heaviest lift I've ever had to do. Taking an organization that was 57 years old and changing the direction, changing the name, building a team of people, to take Las Vegas from the economy that has been used to for the past 50 or 60 years, which has been primarily driven by Las Vegas Boulevard, and turning that into a whole new direction and taking us down a whole new street. So the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, which is now your business connection to the world, and I'm going to share with you how we are connected to the world. Maybe. Or maybe not. Okay. Not so modern technology. So I'm going to go over here and get a little close to you all. So let me tell you what we've been doing. Whoops, and I just screwed up the video, so let me see if I can figure this out. I'm glad you did that because I forgot that this was going to be on YouTube, so I really have to behave myself today. If I offend anyone ahead of time, those of you watching in Disneyland, if I offend you, get over it. Okay. So, Michael, do you want to push? When the music stops, everybody says, this has been a circus for me here. What is going on here? All right, here we go. So what have we been doing? Hi, I'm Tom Skancke. I'm going to start this whole thing over. For the past 25, no, okay. So let's back up a couple slides, Michael. Let's start at the beginning and make sure we get this right. So, we're going to start on this slide. Okay? This is the comedy portion of my presentation. The Nevada Development Authority was 57 years old last year. I'm going to back up to about 14 months ago. When Governor Sandoval was elected, now 4 years ago almost, he made economic development a priority for this state. I've been here 30 years, been through lots of governors. But this governor, in my 30 years of being here, is the first governor that I've seen that actually has made economic development one of his #1 priorities. And what he did was that he restructured economic development in our state. What the governor did was he created a cabinet-level position for economic development, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, GOED. He restructured the entire state's effort by creating 7 regional development authorities. Now that's really important because of the reporting requirements that go from GOED to the RDAs to the local agencies. In Southern Nevada, we have about 90 people full-time working on economic development. That's unprecedented. Our organization has 17, the city has 25, give or take 27. Henderson has about 10. North Las Vegas and the Governor's Office on Economic Development, the university. There's about 90 people here in Southern Nevada now working full-time on economic development. And our local economic development organization applied to be approved by the Governor's Office on Economic Development to become one of the 7 regional development authorities. So they hired this guy, and it's funny, I look just like him. And you guys, these are funny jokes in Nebraska. So catch up. I know it's late in the day, you've had some sugar, so just play along, okay? Don't suck all of my energy out. I've got 2 more of these this afternoon, so stick with me. I've been on board for a year, and I think we've done a lot over the last 12 months, Michael. Or 9 months. So 9 months ago, this February, we rebranded the organization. I'm going to tell you how we got there. I actually used LinkedIn, and if you've not used it, I highly recommend that you do, because it's a very powerful tool, which I did not know until I did this. So I put on my LinkedIn page that I changed my profession from my company of 25 years to the Las Vegas Economic Development Coalition. Not one person wanted to talk to me on LinkedIn. It's like a big deal, right? So then I started messing around with the name, and I thought, well, let's go with Las Vegas Economic Development Council. Nothing that was too political. So I thought, why don't we add the word global? When I added the word global to the name, I got 45 people, give or take, to want to be LinkedIn with me from around the world, not here locally. I went to the market that I wanted to get to, which was the global market. Because Las Vegas is a global tourism destination, and one of the #1 tourism destinations in the world. I went with global. Then I went with alliance. And I went with alliance because council and authority and all those words sounded too familiar, and they sounded too legal and too government. And what had really happened here over the last 48 months was a group of people came together in a collaborative effort to create an alliance of activity. Now, why is that important? Because in my 25 years of being in this community, I'd not seen people form an alliance before on economic development. In fact, over that 2-3 year period of time, right, 300 people came together in this community to change the direction of economic development. That is an alliance. In my 25 years here, I've not seen 300 people come together for anything but a Rebel basketball game. Now that was funny. Next slide. So we changed the name. Then we moved our offices, right? We went from 3,000 square feet to 12,000 square feet. That's huge. We did that because of our partnership with Switch Communications. And we were able to do that because Rob Roy, who's the owner and chairman and visionary and founder of Switch, said, you've got to grow this team, you've got to grow the organization, you need to be in the Innovation Center. And we're going to give you the space. We're going to give you 12,000 square feet for free. Now, as Joe Biden would say, that's kind of a big deal. You add whatever else other word you want to put in there. Come on, you guys. Jeez. This is the best I'm going to get today, all right? So, we moved. Next. And then we grew our team. We went from 7 people, we are now at 17. We have hired some amazing, talented people, including this young man here, Michael Venozzi, in that period of time. We went from a group of people that had run an organization for a number of years at the same and consistent levels. They did a great job. But we had a new mission and a new vision, which was to grow not only the economy and the number of jobs, but to get involved with so many other aspects of what was happening in Southern Nevada. So we basically doubled our team. We quadrupled our space. We doubled our team. We changed the name. We changed the mission and the vision. Okay? The board said to me when I took this job, you have 27 things you have to get done in the first 12 months. Well, let me break my arm, patting myself in the back, saying we did 25 of those things in 9 months, and we got 2 things to do, the 2 heaviest lifts. One being education, which is a very heavy lift, and the second being workforce development, another heavy lift. Ironically, both have a lot in common. So each one of these team members now has a new focus and a new direction for their job, and we've hired qualified individuals to do so. Mike. 2 months ago, we were approved by the Economic Development Administration on our comprehensive economic development strategy. First time Southern Nevada came together. This is what these 300 people did. They came together to create a comprehensive economic development strategy. You may say, big deal. Well, it is a big deal. Because now we have goals and objectives. The plan has to be updated every year, submitted to the Economic Development Administration in Washington, D.C., and every 3 years it has to be completely rewritten and redone, and it's got to be reported to the federal government. You say, okay, why the government? Because Economic Development Administration, EDA, actually has funding for economic development projects. We now can qualify for that type of funding. We can compete with every other region and city around the country for federal funding for projects. Now that would be the part of the presentation where you say, right on, right? Because we've never been able to do that before. Next slide. Then what we did was we did a fundraising strategy, our SEDS document, we did our marketing strategy, our public relations strategy. We sat down as a team of 16 people at the time and said, how are we going to lead this organization forward? We did a day-long workshop with our team. We identified the initiatives that our organization could and should be working on. And we put together a strategic plan with a 12-month and 3 to 5 year set of goals. Wait, it gets better. Okay. We put together a budget, novel idea, with performance measurements. Okay, with performance measurements. Thank you. Now, that was kind of a big deal for some people because that had not been done before. We have a budget that we can go back to the public, our investors, and the governor's office and say, here's our performance metrics, and here's what we've accomplished. That's really important because when people make investments in your organization, they want to know what their return is going to be. That's how we make our investments, right? As business people, as investors. So we've created a strategy now whereby we have a performance matrix with deliverables to the community based upon not just economic development, but across the board, what we refer to as community development, whereby we can report back to the governor's office on economic development, our governor, and our community on what we're doing. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we've launched our Engage Southern Nevada campaign, which is the capital campaign to help us. I'm not going to ask you for money today, but if you feel generous, just kidding. You guys, you've got to pay attention to this stuff. We've launched our Engage Southern Nevada campaign. Our goal is to raise $7.5 million through that campaign over the next 3 years. We've set a budget of $5.4 million a year for the next 3 years, and right now we are on track to raise all that money. Next slide. We are building better connections. These are some of our partners that we've been working with over the last 12 months. We have a great relationship with the university, with the College of Southern Nevada, with the State College, with the school district, the Downtown Project, NV Angels, Switch. I'm not going to go through all these. This is unprecedented in our community. Building collaborative and collective partnerships is how we see ourselves coming out of this recession and growing our economy here in Southern Nevada. Michael. So, we've redefined our organization. Next.
Yep.
Well, I thought we had.
Now we'll redefine economic.
I'm sorry, we'll redefine, just go with me, Michael. Redefine economic development. Keep going. I've got 5 more minutes. So, textbook definition of economic development, right? Is the sustained and concerted actions of policymakers and communities to promote economic vitality, sustainability, and long-term growth. That's the textbook definition. We're going to define it a little differently. Because we're more than just economic development. We need a broader definition. We've got to build cooperative and collective relationships. Next. And we've got to change our current pattern of thought of how we're going to do it. My favorite quote of Albert Einstein is, you've got to change your current pattern of thought in order to solve the problems that we've created with our current pattern of thought. That's what we have to do here. We've got to come up with some new solutions to some new and old problems. Next slide. So we're going to define it a little differently. We're going to be one of the first economic development organizations in the country to have our own angel investor fund. And you may say, big deal to that. Well, that is a big deal. Because when it comes to startups, when it comes to entrepreneurial programs, we are going to be working with a group of individuals and investors to help make those investments in startup companies. We don't believe that there's any other economic development organization in the country that has this asset. Next slide. We are partnering with IBM and GoEd and Nishi and UNLV and the Department of Employment and Training and Rehabilitation. We're partnering with the university, with the Water Authority, with DRI, on the Water Center of Excellence. And we're going to develop initiatives around that Center of Excellence of how we can actually use the facilities and the research facilities and the infrastructure that we have here to share that with the rest of the world. There isn't a better place in the United States to be talking about water resources than right here in Southern Nevada. Next slide. We're going to define our region differently. The definition of globalization is the exchange and interactions of products, services, and worldviews. It's that connectivity. It's the interconnectivity of economies and culture. That's critical for us to understand. Because when you're dealing with the Chinese, or you're dealing with the Mexicans, or you're dealing with the Europeans, it's about their culture. Now, I've studied Chinese culture over the last 10 years. I made that something that I was very into. Started collecting Chinese art about 5 years ago. 10 years ago, I started studying the culture. The reason why is that is a global economy. If you're going to do business with people in other parts of the world, you have to understand their culture. And so, in order for us to actually have a global economic alliance, we have to understand what other cultures and other countries are doing. Next slide. Most of you know that I've spent the better part of 25 years in the infrastructure business. Transportation infrastructure in particular. I spent about 8 years in water infrastructure. You cannot run a $14 trillion economy on a single lane freeway. The backbone of America's economy today is the interstate highway system. Prior to that, it was the transcontinental railroad. And so when you understand that the backbone is infrastructure. It's how you move people and goods. Back in the 1800s, it was rivers and canals. Then we built the Transcontinental Railroad. And then the Eisenhower administration had the vision for the interstate highway system. And the next generation is transit and high-speed rail. Some people don't like those two things. I can do another 2 hours on transit and high-speed rail and why Las Vegas should have transit and high-speed rail. And I'll tell you why in 3 minutes. The millennial generation does not travel by car. If you don't believe me, go to Detroit. Ask GM and Ford. They are not buying automobiles. It's downtime. They are moving to places like Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, Phoenix, Salt Lake, Denver, Dallas, Houston, Chicago. Notice I didn't mention Las Vegas in there, or Reno. And they're doing it because, they're not coming here because we don't have a transit system. It's how they move. This little device right here changed the way 18 to 34-year-olds move, both financially and physically. All of us probably still go to a bank. Well, I don't. I haven't been to a bank in 5 years because of this. Who writes checks? That was a question. Who still writes a check? You are so 20th century. Right? Who goes to a Starbucks and says, here's $20? The people behind the counter are like, oh, look at that old guy. It's not funny. Apps and iPads and cell phones have changed the way our economy and our people move. I wrote an op-ed piece 2 or 3 weeks ago on how millennials move, right? And understanding what they do and how they make their decisions. Of the 300,000, 350,000 people that subscribe to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, 140,000 people read that op-ed. The age bracket was 18 to 38. I was so happy. I connected with those people because it's how they move their economy. So if we're going to attract an educated workforce and a tech workforce and a new economy, we better have the infrastructure in place for how they move. We better start listening to what the next 50 years is, or we're going to miss that train. We can't miss it. We're going to lose out to Denver and Phoenix. Phoenix is the only airport, by the way, in the United States that has a transit line over an active taxiway. If you've not been there, go check it out. You can put a 380 under there or a 747 under an active transit line over an active transit or taxiway. It's pretty incredible. It's like 180 feet in the air. It's amazing. It's like a Disneyland ride. Next slide. We're going to redefine our region. Our competition, by the way, is not Las Vegas and Henderson, right? It's not UNLV against UNR. It's not the College of Southern Nevada against Truckee Meadows. It's not Vegas against Denver. Our competition is the world. Our competition is Shanghai and Beijing and Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Yet we set up a system and a structure of, it's the North against the South. Can I tell you how old that is? We've been a state for 150 years. That's 150 years old. It has to stop. North Las Vegas is not competing with Henderson. That's a partnership. The goal here is to bring as much money to our state. Our competition is the rest of the world. From a convention point of view, we don't build the proper infrastructure. We have people still standing in, this is not popular, so hang on. A 3-hour taxi line at the airport is not popular with global travelers. That's a news flash. When you get off the plane in Paris, you don't take a taxi, you take the train. When you get off a plane in Beijing, you don't take a taxi, you take the train. I've done it. You don't rent a car in Beijing to go to Shanghai, you take the train. In America, you get off of a plane, you go to the terminal, and what do? You see a sign in English that says rental cars. First of all, if I'm from China, I can't read the sign. And second of all, what the hell's a rental car? Cultural connectivity of economies and people, right? So you've got to change that pattern of thought of how we do all of these things. The competition is around the world. And our community relies upon one industry in the past. And that industry is threatened. I'll give you an example. Orlando just announced transit connectivity from their airport to their convention center. Whoops. That's not a good thing for us, because that's one of our biggest competitors for our convention business. And they're all doing it. You land in the Abu Dhabi airport and you take a rather quick transit system to the new convention center in Abu Dhabi. You don't rent a car. You don't take a taxi. We'll lose out to the rest of the world if we don't create that environment. We cannot compete in a 21st century global economy if 60% of our students are graduating from high school. If you all had paper and pen, I'd have you write this down. 80% of the kids who drop out of high school today make their decision in 5th grade. I can't make this stuff up. 5th grade. If they're not reading, writing, and arithmeticing by the time they leave 3rd grade, by the time they get to 5th grade, they're so far behind they don't give a rat's tail of what happens in the future, and they're gone. And then people say, well, that affects us on the expense side. No, it affects us on the revenue side. 42,000 kids in the Clark County School District go to school hungry. 31,000 are homeless. That's not good. With 80% of our high school graduates dropping out. Now that's something to be proud of. No, it's not. It affects us on the revenue side. These young people are not contributing to our economy. If we could get them on the revenue side, doesn't that improve our economy? Absolutely. If they can get a job and they can make investments, then that improves our economy. Next slide. So, we can do this together. We can do it by partnerships. We can do it by all of us getting involved. We can do it by changing our current pattern of thought. We are in a 21st century global economy. And our goal at our organization is to change that. Be engaged with it. Partner with the rest of the world and partner with the rest of the region. These 7 Intermountain Western states are the future of the nation's economy. The majority of the U.S.'s population is going to live in the desert Southwest and Intermountain West over the next 50 years. So it's incumbent upon all of us to be a part of that future. And the direction that our organization is going to take is a very aggressive approach to education, transportation, water infrastructure, working with the Governor's Office on Economic Development, working on sector development. It's more than just job creation, and it's more than just attracting businesses. It's really changing the strategic positioning of Southern Nevada. So with that, I'd be happy to answer, that is pretty good. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Except for you. All right, anybody over here? John, go ahead.
Thank you, Tom. I'm bringing in a group of a delegation from Kazakhstan, academics, business people. Is there any way to engage with the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance with these people?
Absolutely. We just, as an example, we just had a group of 30 investors from China in town 2 weeks ago. Ishmael has brought a delegation from Turkey. I've met with, I don't know, probably 50 people from China and Mexico, and we had a group of we had a group of 25 or 30 people in from Mexico. So we meet with a lot of folks from around the world to talk about investment opportunities in Southern Nevada, and we meet with a lot of companies every week.
So should I call you, or should I call Chris?
The best person to call would be to call Jonas Peterson and get that set up. Jonas is our Chief Operating Officer. I hired him about 4 months ago. He is a certified economic development professional. He's doing all the economic development piece. I'm doing all the speeches and all the 70,000-foot strategic work, and he's boots on the ground.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you.
Tom, you talked about the interstate highway system, but you didn't mention the I-11 corridor. I'm wondering if you think that is going to be a reality, or does it get crowded out from a funding standpoint with all the trains going into California?
So the question was Interstate 11, and I apologize, I should have brought that up because I was one of the folks who actually helped put that together about 5 years ago. Interstate 11 is between Phoenix and Las Vegas, for those of you that don't know. Phoenix and Las Vegas are the only two major metropolitan areas in the United States with a population of 1 million or more that are not connected by an interstate highway. Back when the interstate highway system was created in the 1950s, the population between Phoenix and Las Vegas was practically zero. And now between the two MSAs, there's around 8 million people, and growing. So Interstate 11 will happen. It will not compete with other projects. This is my opinion. It'll be funded, it will be constructed, and it will be built. ADOT and NDOT have formed a partnership right now to work on a major investment study in the corridor. From there, we select alternatives to move forward with the NEPA process. I believe the project has qualified for NEPA streamlining and project delivery streamlining through the US DOT. So I know this sounds like a long time. This is not. But that project was conceived in, this is 2009, 2010. And we could see that project delivered sometime in the next 10 years, which is rocket speed for a transportation project. Usually it takes about 15 to 20 years to get through just a process. My guess is we will see that road constructed and completed sometime in the next 7 to 10 years. If they allow private sector investment, it could be done sooner than that. That is probably the single most important economic development infrastructure project to the future of Southern Nevada. Any other questions? Oh, good. Mr. Buckley.
What about the high-speed transportation from California?
So that's one of my favorite topics, is high-speed rail. I've been an advocate for that for 30 years. It's a little derailed right now. Believe it or not, there's politics involved with that. I have no idea how that happened. But the concept and the connectivity is important. High-speed rail does not compete with air or surface transportation. It provides another mode. So it actually increases your marketability and actually increases your destination's potential by having it. I'm not certain what the future of it is in this country because they've politicized it. Every other country in the world is spending billions. From China to India to Russia to South America, Australia, South Africa. Here's one for you. Morocco. Morocco is investing about 4%, if I recall, of their GDP in high-speed rail. That's kind of a big number. Here's an interesting statistic. When I was in China 3 years ago, I sat down with kind of one of the guys that was doing high-speed rail and infrastructure investments in China, and I said, so where did you guys put all this together? And they said, well, we used your formula in the United States from the 1950s. I said, oh, which one was that? Oh, the one where you invest 6% of your GDP in transportation infrastructure. I said, oh, that was a good idea. And then I did some research. You know what we invest today? Less than 1% of our GDP is invested in infrastructure, highway infrastructure. Well, transportation infrastructure. So the rest of the world is investing at those levels, and we're back to less than 1%, which doesn't allow you to be globally competitive. Now, high-speed rail between here and Southern California would increase our market share substantially. The Desert Express / the Desert Express project is critical. People say it's Vegas to Victorville. No, it's not.